Good morning, everyone. My name's Jim Ryan, and I'm the president of the University of Virginia. And I'd like to start by giving some thanks. First, thanks to everyone who organized this symposium and made it happen. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks to Malo for his leadership. And Thomas, thank you for sharing some of your insights. I'm going to do, in my very brief remarks, what I often do when I'm at an event or a conference or a symposium, where it's pretty clear to me that every person in the audience knows more about the topic than I do. And so I'm going to tell you what you already know. And that is, and this is something I believe firmly, that climate change is the issue of our time. It is not hyperbolic to say that it is existential. It is changing our environment already, it's changing how we live, and it's changing how we think about the future. Just to give you two examples, I don't know if you saw the article in the New York Times this weekend about the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It's a truly alarming article which talks about the fact that the lake is evaporating and has shrunk so much that it is not just endangering the migratory birds and damaging the shrimp industry, but it's also exposing toxic chemicals in the bed of the Great Salt Lake that had been previously underwater and is now exposed to the wind and being carried in the atmosphere. It is not implausible to think, if something's not done about this, that people will have to leave Salt Lake City. To give you a second example, my wife Katie and I have 4 kids. 2 of them recently graduated from college. One is a senior in college, and we have a daughter in high school. And in talking to them about their future, they are seriously wondering if they get married and are thinking about having kids, whether to have kids. It is not a joke for them, and it's not an idle conversation. They're seriously concerned about whether, if they have kids, their kids will be able to live in a habitable world. I find this reassuring in some respects because it is not a joke to them, and they are taking it seriously, but it's also incredibly depressing to think that this is on their minds. The problem is not just incredibly significant, but also complicated because it's multifaceted. It affects everything from the Arctic to the tropics, from the mountains to the coastline, and the solutions themselves are also going to have to be multifaceted. We're going to have to be thinking about what materials we use for construction. We're going to have to be working at the level of design. We're going to have to be working at the level of policy and practice. We're going to have to be working at the local level, at the national level, and at the international level. I often talk about the idea of UVA being both great and good. And by that, I mean being excellent, but excellent for the purpose of advancing the common good. And faculty in the architecture school do this every single day. And this symposium itself is a great example of what I mean. Bringing to bear expertise among policymakers, practitioners, faculty, to tackle and address the challenge of our lifetime. So it is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me and letting me barge in on your conference to tell you what you already know. And with that, I'm going to turn the podium over to Malo. Thanks again.
I want to thank President Ryan for his leadership, and thank you all for being here. I hope you, for those who came in from out of town, you got to see the beautiful day here yesterday. It's like this all the time, so please come visit us. One of the things I want to start off by saying after hearing President Ryan is, I came here because leadership matters. And when you think about the role of the 21st century university, yes, we need to educate our students. Yes, we need to challenge them. We need to do research. We need to teach at an extremely high level. We need to do service, not only across grounds in our particular fields, but also in the community. But when you think about the role of the 21st century university today, it's to have impact. What's the point of being at a great university like the University of Virginia and all the great work that's happening across grounds and certainly within the A School you'll hear about today and who we've been partnering with if we don't have impact. And so for me, it's really important to be here. I'm grateful to be here. And as we go over the next 2 days, talking about our work, thinking about ways we can keep challenging ourselves, let's think about the impact that we can all have. And so I just want to thank President Ryan and you all for being here to have this discussion with us. I also wanted to thank many people. Obviously, putting something like this together takes so much work and so much time and the support of generous people. So first, I want to thank Thomas Woltz and the Woltz family. This would not have happened were it not for their generous support and just engagement over the years. And certainly since I've become dean, I'm grateful for your friendship and also your honesty in how we can do better and what we're doing well and how we go forward. So thank you so much. President Ryan and the Office of the President, thank you. The Office of the Vice President for Research, where's Ram, thank you so much for the help you've done, and especially the champions of the environmental resilience and sustainability efforts. It's really made a difference for us and for this university. Much of the work that we'll be sharing today would not be possible without external private support, without federal support, but also the support of our colleagues across grounds. There are many of them here today, and some will be coming in and out, but certainly the Environmental Resilience Institute, where's Karen? Hi, Karen, thank you. Just thank you for your leadership and thank you for your commitment to push us all to just always do better. So thank you for being here and all the support. The Office of Sustainability at UVA, the Jefferson Trust, the Equity Center, the Center for Global Inquiry and Innovation, and to be honest with you, there's so many allies and wonderful people, it would take me all day just to thank people, but I just want to send those shout outs. Since we launched our climate initiative less than 2 years ago, our faculty have raised about $3 million. So we're just at the cusp of $3 million in less than 2 years. We have another $4.5 million in the pipeline. So that's quite remarkable. I think that they deserve a round of applause for that. I just can't say enough about how outstanding our faculty are. So President Ryan, we're trying to live up to the values of being great and good, as you said. But much of our work spans from biomaterials to nature-based infrastructure to thinking about food systems to community-based research and thinking about social repair, and we go on and on. That's just a sampling of what you'll hear today. I also want to thank our staff, our faculty for all the logistics of this wonderful event, the communications and exhibitions team. There's so many of you to recognize. I'll do that later, but we know who you are. Our facility staff, and our executive team across research, advancement, and administration. Thank you all for what you've done. And I want to thank you all who are participating, our faculty, our staff, our students, and I can tell you, being dean of this wonderful school, our faculty are always in demand for what they do. And they are so selfless and take the time out to present. I know a number of you have asked to present over and over about the wonderful work you do, and you always jump at the opportunity, so I'm grateful for that, because I think it's important to not only be great scholars, to be great teachers, but to actually be able to share your work and translate that into the real world, to have impact, as I said earlier. I want to thank our students who are here and participating and volunteering, our visiting guest panelists. Many have come from far and wide to be here. So thank you for all coming. And then, as you can see, we've got a whole group of people in the back here that have, at the code building, the staff here, the media team, from what I understand, they've been setting up all weekend long for us to have a wonderful event. So thank you for that. And I want to thank our vendors, the food vendors, and also the composting that they're doing for this event. So thank you there. And lastly, I want to thank those who are online. Many people can't be here for all kinds of reasons, so we know you're live streaming. I just want to get a shout out to you, so I know you're there. We're thinking about you, so thank you for participating online. All right, now I would like to introduce Thomas Woltz. As I said before, Thomas Woltz has been a friend to me, has been a friend to the school, but more importantly, I think Thomas represents all the values that we really care about. He's built an incredible career that's value-driven, and that's about having impact. Thomas is a distinguished alum and great supporter of the A School. He earned his Bachelor of Architecture degree, his Master's of Architecture degree, and his Master's of Landscape Architecture degree, all from the University of Virginia. He's a triple who, so this is great. And maybe more, right, Thomas? Yes, yes. So thank you. Thomas is the owner of Nelson Bird Woltz Landscape Architects, splitting his time between Charlottesville and New York City. At present, Thomas is leading Nelson Bird Woltz and the design of significant public landscapes across the United States, Canada, and New Zealand, including the John and Alice Coltrane Home in New York, Holden Forest and Arboretum in Cleveland, Cornwall Park in Auckland, and Memorial Park in Houston. The Memorial Park in Houston just opened not too long ago with the Memorial Park Land Bridge and Prairie, I should be more specific, the Memorial Park Land Bridge and Prairie project, which has taken on so many aspects to it: ecology, resilience, thinking about biodiversity, stormwater management. Many of the things that we're always talking about now, Thomas has been doing it and his colleagues for many years. The project has been described as among the 11th most architecturally innovative projects in the world. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at this, please do. The New York Times, when discussing this project, said, "The best architecture can transform our ways of thinking, our work, our connections to local community." And that's incredibly important when we start talking about our values in the work that we do. Thomas is an emeritus member of the UVA School of Architecture Foundation Board of Trustees, a longtime supporter of the landscape department, and as well as the A School and the Veneto programs. He has taught at the A School and as a family established the Woltz Symposium Endowment Fund, which is supporting the Climate Transformation Symposium today. So again, let's give a warm round of applause for Thomas Woltz. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the kind words, Malo. And thank you, President Ryan, for being here and for kicking us off today. 24 years ago, while working closely with Beth Meyer, Robin Drips, and Peter Waldman, I wanted to interrogate what initiatives might best serve faculty and students at the School of Architecture as I began working with an aging father who wanted to make a gift to his alma mater, the University of Virginia. He had been president of the student body, president of the Honor Council, all before graduating in 1947 upon the completion of his military service in World War II. He was grateful to the university for the many gifts it had given him, as I am. We made a good team. I assured him that the School of Architecture would be a grateful beneficiary and a careful steward of his intentions, and that I would remain close at hand for the ongoing stewardship of that gift. Thus, the Woltz Symposium began. From my conversations long ago with Peter, Beth, and Robin, and from my own experience as a student in both the Arts and Sciences, College of Arts and Sciences and the School of Architecture, we identified the following key needs that a symposium might fulfill. 1, opportunities to outwardly communicate and spotlight the interdisciplinary terrain that the School of Architecture was pioneering between planning, history, landscape, and architecture to address the most pressing issues of our day. Having degrees from 3 of those 4 A-School departments, I can attest to the role of interdisciplinary thinking has made in shaping my own career. And I'm reminded that the most creative solutions to answers, the most creative answers to problems might actually lie in the space between disciplines. And that is the essence of this symposium, to explore that terrain. A second goal was to offer funding for younger faculty to convene large conversations, including international participants like Hanif Kara, my friend who is here today, around their research topics that would lead to publications, helping advance tenure preparation while bringing diverse outside voices into face-to-face dialogue with students. By funding publications of the proceedings, we could not only document the convening, but also advance faculty research, engage students, and tell our story outside of our own school. The third goal was for the topic of the symposium to saturate the school through studios, seminars, and thesis, knowing that it would culminate in a convening of national and international scholars and practitioners like what we have here today. These goals are still as relevant as they were 2 decades ago when the first Woltz Symposium convened at the University of Virginia in 2001. As designers working in these allied disciplines, we have a powerful toolkit to offer the world. Ways of seeing complex problems that identify systems over objects, see the interconnectedness of things across expected boundaries, and find the bond between the human condition and the built environment. Over the last 25 years of practice, I have dedicated myself to a mission of using design to forge the meaningful connections between humans and the environment in the public landscape. I believe that parks, arboreta, conservation lands, botanic gardens, and campuses are essential components of a healthy democratic society. Free access to nature is essential to our mental and physical well-being, as well as the health of a democratic vision for our country. Today's topic of climate transformation is constantly front of mind in this work, and as we start the day, I'm excited to learn about the ways in which design, technical innovation, policy, politics, economics, and law can alter the current trajectory of climate. Success will require a disruptive paradigm shift in the consciousness of every individual to see ourselves as inseparable from nature if we are to achieve the needed change. I believe that some of our most impactful tools are rooted in identifying the cultural continuum of humans' relationship to land, buildings, and space. The poetic reveal of this continuum can build a unique bond between people and place. The more we know about the nature we inhabit, the culture and ecological forces within, the more we will fight for its protection and make the necessary sacrifices to achieve these goals. I hope that the proceedings of this symposium will inspire each of us to new ways of thinking, revealing the power of creativity and design to innovative solutions, to find innovative solutions, and inspire the needed cultural paradigm shift to achieve climate transformation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Thomas, for your words. Now what we'd like to do is ease into a panel so you can hear from our department chairs. And so I will introduce them one by one. Will Professor Gina Ripple, who's chair of the Department of Architecture, please come up? Bradley Cantrell, Professor Cantrell is the chair of the Landscape Architecture Department. I would like to invite Professor Suzanne Muma up, who's chair and also director of our real estate design and development program, but she's chair of urban environmental planning, so welcome, Suzanne. And Professor Sheila Crane, who's the chair of our architectural history program, so thank you all. It's a little weird for you so formal. Can you hear me? Nope. All right. Gina, there you go. Gina's here to save the day as always. So what's so wonderful being dean is when you have 4 great chairs, you just have to show up. You see this today firsthand. Why don't we start with architecture? So as I've been traveling as dean, and I tell our alums or friends of the university or just those who are interested in UVA about the kind of things we're doing, people are always amazed about architecture, and they think of it as the old school of architecture, the old way of doing things. Gina, do you mind expanding on how we think about architecture within the A School, and certainly as it relates to climate justice, climate resilience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I think one of the distinguishing features about architectural research today that Thomas already began to describe and that you'll be hearing more about is that we're always looking at a problem from a multifaceted approach, not only as a technical problem, but also as a social problem, not only as an aesthetic opportunity, but also an ethical responsibility. And so what you'll see today are, there are faculty across the department that I would say are working on 3 primary themes related to climate change, building technology, issues of building technology, issues of habitation, and also issues of cities and systems. And so just to give you some examples of how that overlapping perspective works, some of our faculty who'll be presenting today on building technology are looking at low carbon materials, plant-based materials, structural systems, not only from the perspective of how do we build with these things, but who builds and what resources might be appropriate to build in certain ways in certain locations. In terms of human habitation, we're looking at multifamily housing, we're looking at the workplace of the future, but not only in terms of how do we design for these spaces, but how do we design healthy spaces, spaces that promote well-being. In terms of cities and systems, we're looking at river ecologies in India, we're looking at new habitation of the Arctic, and once again, always from this perspective of the ethical and the aesthetic, from the social and the technical perspectives.
It's wonderful. I would like to move over to you, Brad, to talk about landscape architecture. One of the things I've been hearing is that people say it's landscape architecture's time, given the challenges that we face in the world. We know what's happening in terms of our coastal lands, our food systems, the just changing climate altogether, but there's so much more involved with what you all do. Do you mind first just telling us a little bit about what is landscape architecture for those who may not know the way we think about it, and then where do we land when it comes to these issues of climate resilience and climate justice?
Well, some people are confused because it's always been landscape's time, I will say that. I would say, the beauty of the way I think the discipline is addressing climate change is that the medium itself that we work with is alive, and all of the issues around climate change, in my opinion, are centered on this kind of cultivation of life on the planet. Within that, the idea of change also is, and temporality is part of that medium. And so not only the way we train kind of the future leaders in the discipline, but also the way we address projects have to do with this idea that the medium has its own autonomy, and so we're developing techniques to understand how it evolves over time, and also how it might be slightly indeterminate, right? We can't exactly choose the outcome all the time, and this is, I think, critical to us understanding our next steps on the planet, right? Is the fact that we might not be completely in control. We might have to be slightly more humble in terms of our approaches, and I think landscape always tries to take on those types of approaches, right? And this is kind of, once again, at the core of what we do. Our professional organization, the American Society of Landscape Architects, also, I would say, at the core of their mission, what they're lobbying for, what they're pushing for, are ways that we can begin to address climate change. So this kind of sits kind of just at the, kind of core of what we do. And when we're educating students, then, we're really thinking of this through how we cultivate not only comfort for humans, but also human and non-human relationships, which I think is critical. As well as how we, how we move into a future where, we're considering not only the changes we see today, but the kind of generational changes to come, right? So this is, I think, part of the reason that I believe landscape is so critical. The last thing I'll just put into that is that what we've heard here is that the problems we're addressing, they're so big, they're so complex, that it's not just one discipline that takes them on. And I think, at the core of this is, landscape in some ways synthesizes multiple disciplines coming together. And I believe we take it very seriously how we build those collaborations.
Thank you so much, Brad. Suzanne, I would like to come to you. Oftentimes when you think about schools that have urban planning or city planning programs, there's this dichotomy between the urban and the rural. One of the things I've enjoyed about being here and spending time with my colleagues is that we think about it as a continuum. There is no separation between the urban and rural. We understand this interconnection, this interdependence. Do you mind expanding on that, and then also just telling us how you think about it within urban environmental planning? And one of the things is, where is the justice in the work that we all do?
Welcome, everyone. I get a lot of questions, as you might guess, from prospective students about what is urban planning? What would you do? And so my answer to Malo is it's about how we live. It's about safety, it's about food, it's about justice, it's about housing, it's about land use, it's about transportation. You can fill in the blank. So when you have that kind of broad platform and you're sitting at a climate symposium, you have to ask yourself, what role does urban planning play in all of these challenges that we face? Because all of those things contribute to the crisis that we're facing. So let me start with the bad news and go to the good news. The bad news is that if we do nothing and that our planet increases 2 degrees Celsius in the next 27 years, 27 more Waltz Symposia, what will that mean? That will mean that 150 billion people will be more at risk than they are this morning. It will mean that $158 trillion in damage will be done to our planet because of climate change events. So with that kind of small challenge, shall we say, what does urban planning, what do we do? What's our role? And I'd like to answer that in 5 small answers. The first thing is that we have to mitigate and protect at the same time. And that's not just in the big urban areas. That's not just in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Miami. That's in Southwest Virginia. That's in coastal Virginia. That's in the deep South, where we've just seen the tragedies of tornadoes. So we have a dual responsibility. So we've got to stop the bleeding, but we've got to repair the damage we've already done. That's a tall order. The second thing is that we have to reframe the problem. The UN, the Cities 40, and others have these very, very distinct and broad-reaching goals for climate change. But most of our parents or grandparents or friends don't know quite what to do with that. So part of the issue is, how do we reframe it? How do we think about how to describe the problem of climate change so we can get to a solution? The third thing is our students. And I just graded 62 midterms. So that's why I'm looking a little haggard if I do. And I asked them, what's the one problem that worries you the most? 75% of them said climate change. Now, these are first-year and second-year students. So our job is to give them hope and possibility, because they do not know how to move forward and what to do with as Jim Ryan said, what to do with their own future. That's our job. And then finally, we talk a lot about leadership. It's a word we all throw out. But what is that? And what does that mean for these students that I look about the same number or more on Tuesday afternoon? Leadership is at its core about vision and persistence. You have to see it and see it through. And so as we're thinking about students in urban planning, my colleagues across the school and the university, because these are collaborative answers, we've got to prepare our students to actually pick up this mantle, not next year, not when they get their MBA or their master's degree in something, but actually before they leave the university. So it's all about hope and possibility.
Thank you, Suzanne. Now over to you, Sheila. We have the oldest architectural history program in the country, and oftentimes people don't readily make the connection between architectural history and climate. Do you mind telling us how you approach this and how you think about it?
Sure. Thank you, Malo, and thanks everyone for being here. It's true that architectural history is not the thing that first comes to mind when you think about climate change and climate transformations. Often the discussion is about the pressing future solutions that we need to grapple with. But I would say that in history, as we understand it in an expansive, interdisciplinary way, to understand where we are now, we need to know how we got here. And we need to understand and think critically about the systems, the materials, the modes of production that have led us to the place we find ourselves in today. And so I would say in architectural history, it's really our students who are leading the charge in asking new questions, in thinking about new ways of narrating material histories that operate between the human and the non-human, to think about large structures and systems that have led to intensive industrialization, its demise and its aftermaths. In the realm of history, as all of you, I'm sure, are very well aware, the really pressing work now is whose stories are being told, whose histories are we listening to. And this is a critical element in thinking about climate resilience and its integral relationship to climate justice, that there are so many ways, so many embodied ways of knowing, community knowledge, ways of engaging and building and transforming and working with the landscape and built environments that are embodied practices that we've often destroyed or ignored. And so the work of many of our faculty and students are about really trying to grapple in a multifaceted way with how we even rethink what counts as history and whose knowledge and stories are told. And I think, I am always in awe of my colleagues who can visualize things in ways that make for really compelling, tangible arguments that I think are so important to understanding new futures. But understanding the resources that we have in looking at the past and telling new stories about the histories of resilience and adaptation that are so critical to our longer-term human, non-human entanglements are really an important part of the puzzle. So these are all things that our students and faculty are engaged in, even if they may not think about their work front and center as about climate transformations. Those pieces are part of the conversation. And I'll just end by saying, it's not just that these are questions that are happening in the history department. They're questions that serve as a kind of spine connecting all of us. I'm struck by, I hope you all saw Gina Ripple talking in the video a little bit about her research on building codes. It's a project that is about thinking about new futures, but one in which she's been grappling with the past of material production in cities across the United States. So I think history and the kind of humanistic inquiry filters its way through our disciplines in a way that I find particularly compelling about what we are able to do in the School of Architecture at UVA.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sheila. Now let's open it up a little bit more, but I do have a question for Gina. We don't have to go in the same order anymore, just for you. Sheila was a great segue. It was almost like we just planted you here to say that. But in architecture, we know we have a number of faculty, including yourself, just doing tremendous work when what we might think is design innovation or innovation in general, structures. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and where you think architecture is going in this area?
Sure. We're hearing a lot. It's hard to avoid in a conference like this discussions of how urgent, how pressing some of these issues are and how daunting they can be. But there is also a lot that has changed and is changing about the 21st Century University and the 21st Century School of Architecture that I think builds on the strong traditions that this school has had of a kind of culture of collaboration, but also does so in ways that make us optimistic for what our students can accomplish, what collaborative research can accomplish. So a couple of examples of that, of what we're doing now and where we think that'll lead us. Increasingly, funding agencies nationally are providing opportunities for more action-based research. So to put something, as Brad was saying, to kind of put forth a proposal with humility, test it, see what's happening, analyze it, and then respond. And so that is increasingly a way that we're teaching design methods, that we're looking at what we have done and what has happened based on histories. We're looking at how we can set something in motion and prototype something and test it and revise. And we're increasingly having opportunities with partners at the university to do that in a collaborative setting, where we're working on research teams across disciplines and bringing some of using some of our background, learning from our colleagues' background to see where the exchanges can lead. I would say some of the opportunities that happen next are how do we integrate that further into our curriculum. We now have a research methods course that is required for all Master of Architecture students. How do we refine that, build on that, use the expertise from our partner disciplines that have long taught research methods to embed that into a way of thinking that can impact practice. We have a design minor that we're building on as a way to say, okay, cross grounds, there's interest in design approaches, there's interest in thinking about how empathy-based design can lead to new ways of understanding priorities and more diverse perspectives, as Sheila was saying. So those are some of the curricular approaches that we're using to try to take this strong culture of collaboration and build it also into the student experience.
Fantastic. I want to go to Suzanne and continue with the conversation around collaboration. As you see in our room, we have wonderful colleagues from across grounds, externally, and I can think of urban environmental planning, given the scale that you oftentimes operate in, you need to think about your partners, whether we're thinking about our partners here, the Environmental Resilience Institute, the Center for the Built Environment, Real Estate in the Built Environment, and so forth, engineering, data science. How do you approach collaboration?
That's a great question, and one that we all struggle with and embrace. I think the answer to that is that any of the issues that any of us have talked about in the last few minutes require disciplines beyond our own. So one of the challenges that urban planning has had over time is that we have, one of our issues is around urban development, of course. And so you have just heard from my four colleagues sitting here that you can't do urban development in this city or any other without calling on the environmental specialist, the equity partners, the housing specialist, the regulatory people, the zoners, you name it. And so one of the issues going forward for our discipline, but also all others, in addition to across the university, is how do we, I'll go back to a point I made earlier, how do we frame this tent for going forward with climate change so that you have the right people, or as Jim Collins said, get the right people on the bus, the right people off the bus, and get the bus going in the right direction. And that's all about a collaborative approach, and for people being responsible and intersecting their work with the larger goals and aspirations of change in our world. So I think it's a big tent, it's a big bus, but the people who've been holding us back can't go.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Brad, next question is for you. As we think about landscape architecture, you brought up a really important point in your work as you think about the balance between humans and non-humans and that relationship. Can you talk about that tension and how you all approach your work, and what are some of the challenges or opportunities that you see and what landscape architects do, and also how you think about collaboration?
Well, so one part of this is the kind of non-human-human relationship. We can think of that as a collaboration, and I think that's actually an important way to look at it. It's not so much humans being, caretakers for all of these other species that have their own agendas around the world. So I think part of that is, once again, I use the word humility, but how do we go in those situations in ways that allows us to, design landscapes that are open in some sense, that are not just for human safety and comfort, but might have a broader range of purpose, and also a deeper synthesis with the environments that they're situated in. So I think that's one aspect of, you could think of it as a collaboration with non-human species, which we're not necessarily communicating with in a deep way, but we're trying to be collaborators in that sense. The other part is, we talked about the complexity of the questions and the kind of issues that are out there. Part of the way I talk to students about being great collaborators is being really great landscape architects first, really understanding our discipline deeply so that we can go out and we can collaborate with others and actually bring something to the table, right? And we're not trying to be engineers, we're not trying to be scientists, we're not trying to be architects or planners, but instead we're being great landscape architects. And in that sense, we can come to a moment and frame the questions through the values that we promote as a discipline, as well as the technical skills that we have as a discipline. I think one of the things that design brings in that case then is part of it's about addressing a problem and finding a solution for it, but it's also situating it as a cultural project. And in that way, when we do that, we're building kind of approaches that not only, I would say, make the world better through a solution, but also make humans care about it more, and make us kind of have a longevity to kind of want to kind of move forward with that type of approach, basically. So this kind of bigger cultural project is one of the things that I think design is it's really important for the way we begin to address these future scenarios.
Thank you so much, Brad. Sheila, you touched a lot on history, culture, certainly in your work and the work of colleagues in your department. Do you mind expanding a bit on how you think about, obviously, a democratic society and the importance of democracy? I know it's a big question here. but culture and identity matter a great deal. I've done quite a bit of travel on my own work, and I've done work in South America and in Chile, to be more specific. And you talk to people, whether they be farmers or people who have been there for a long time. You say, well, you're living in a floodplain, or you're living in a place that's more prone to disaster, and they start talking about multi-generations that have lived there and how they've survived and the subsistence on the land. And so oftentimes we can talk about climate change and climate resilience and climate justice, but at the same time, it's incredibly important to think about culture, identity, the significance of place. Can you expand on that for me?
Sure, thank you, Malo. I mean, these are critical questions and really central to the work of our faculty, but I'd really like to kind of highlight some of the work of our students, because I think that they are taking on these issues of how to really think in new ways about the integrated nature of cultural and ecological preservation, adaptation, resilience. So we have a doctoral student in the Art and Architectural History PhD program who's been spending the year in Istanbul, James Razumov, and he's looking at early Eastern Mediterranean cities and how non-elite urban residents responded to earthquakes, to the silting of harbors, to environmental disaster in the early medieval period, and really thinking about these responses and cultural competencies, in a sense, as being things that we need to not only be thinking about how to grapple with the situation we find ourselves in now, which is quite different from an earthquake in Thessaloniki in the 12th century. But nonetheless, there are cultural tools and know-how there. And I think given in the School of Architecture, the close relationship between questions of cultural landscapes, historic preservation, and architectural history, that these kind of issues have been front and center. So I'm also thinking of a current Master of Architectural History student who is a member of the Haudenosaunee Nation. And she is undertaking work with community partners of one of the branches of that nation in Virginia, and trying to actually document a history that has been largely lost. So I think part of the challenge in kind of thinking about climate resilience and climate justice is partly about uncovering the histories and cultural practices that have not been the dominant ones that have been highlighted, but that are really critical to thinking about longer-term survival.
Thank you so much. We've discussed the importance of the 21st century university. Certainly I brought that up earlier, and Thomas Wilson, President Ryan have also brought that up as an important issue. How are we as a school, and certainly you as leaders within the school of the respective departments, really ensuring that our students not only know the latest theory, obviously the methodology is incredibly important, but how are we making sure that they're engaging what we would say in the real world? How are we making sure that they get out there and engage with our colleagues, get out in the city of Charlottesville and beyond, and so they have a balanced education? We have an alumni panel tomorrow. We'll get to hear from some of our alumni about the great work they're doing out now that they've long graduated from here. But how are we ensuring that we are just not in the clouds on the 30,000-foot level and not being grounded? And I know we have a number of faculty that do great work on the ground, but how are you combining those two? So I thought I'd just go through and ask each of you, how do you think about this as chair of architecture?
Sure. I think one of the things that, a couple of ways that students are engaging. One is through courses that allow for that engagement, and then also through engagement with faculty research directly. When we think about our students, what comes to mind is how broad that sometimes is, that definition of our students. I'm looking at Phoebe Chrisman and thinking about all of the students that you're engaged with through the Global Sustainability Program across the university, and the partnerships that you foster within those courses to allow students to begin to work through these challenges with real partners. The same is true for community engagement courses with Barbara Brown-Wilson, design thinking courses with Elgin Cleckley, Tim Beatley's courses. So our students really becomes a university-wide definition. We also then, primarily with students within the architecture school, have opportunities for students to join research teams. And in large part, thanks to some of our great communications team, that is now a process that is available and visible to all students. It's available and visible to our prospective students. And so one of the things that I've started noticing, and I'm sure my colleagues have, is that that visibility of the opportunities gives rise to students who are coming here with like-minded goals. So in the admission statements, we're seeing students who are so tuned in to, this is the work that you're doing, I want to be a part of that, and they come here knowing who they want to work with, and we try to foster those opportunities as much as possible.
Thank you.
There's a lot of similar overlap in this way. In terms of students working with faculty in research, I think also there's a real kind of discourse and discussion in the school about where kind of academia is pushing, but also where what's important about practice and how projects are framed, how we begin to educate clients and work with clients in order to, in a way, take on many of these issues that may go beyond what a client kind of even understands about what the project is. So I think that discussion is part of it. I think the other aspect that I'll just kind of, beyond kind of what we were talking about here in terms of faculty research, we have a lot of students involved, but also a commitment to beginning to take what students are learning in the design studio and their kind of technical courses and begin to take that curriculum out into the landscape. And so we have a big commitment to field work. The Milton Airfield is a site we've been working on, allowing students to actually move soil around and understand kind of how land is formed, but also long-term kind of monitoring in that site for students, also controlled burns, kind of ways of getting students really out into the landscape to see these kind of physical aspects of it as well. So I think that's just another piece that expands on what Gina was talking about.
Great, thank you, Brad. Suzanne.
I would really answer that in three ways. The first, of course, is internships and having an opportunity to work with practitioners and others. The second, that's invaluable in opening their eyes, and I'm sure it's a reciprocal relationship. The second is to get them to speak up. They have enormous knowledge and perspective, and encouraging them to use that and express their opinions and their ideas. We have an incredibly bright group every year, and most of them are not hesitant to do that, shall I say, but encouraging more of that. And the third is, and I'm looking at my colleagues Barbara Brown Wilson and Tanya Dinkler-Cobb, who are sitting on row 2, this is allowing them to apply research. And this is not just about internships. This is encouraging their own individual research. It's pairing them with teams of people that actually analyze a situation and write about it and work with community members. So actually getting them in the meat of these problems that we're talking about. And the corollary to that is this. At the end of the day, people talk a good game. Students talk a good game. But the question for them, and bringing them back to it time after time after time, just as the Wright brothers said, did the plane fly? So as we think about asking them in climate change, equity, housing, et cetera, it's more than describing, it's more than analyzing, did the plane fly? And that's where we want our students to go.
Thank you, Suzanne. Sheila.
I'll echo a lot of the things that my colleagues have already offered. I mean, certainly experiences in the classroom are critical, but that's often a mobile classroom, one that is engaged in field methods and documentation, working with communities. My colleague Lewis Nelson has been doing a multi-year project with his students in a class called Archives and Evidence that would seem to be, something that letting students look at dusty tomes and in places no one goes. But in fact, he and his students have been out really documenting in dialogue with community members the history of African American cultural landscapes in and around Charlottesville. So that gives a little sense of what architectural history in the 21st century looks like, both doing different kinds of field work and work with community members. And all of our students have the opportunity to do a thesis as the culminating project. And I would say, that is the arena in which new questions are being asked and new connections are being made. Often the place where questioning the kind of categories that we operate under begins to happen. So those are probably the critical arenas for our students, and projects that often require collaboration and input from others as well.
Well, thank you very much. I know we're ending this time for this particular session, but I want to thank you all. You can see why I'm so optimistic about the leadership that we have in the school. We have just some incredible leaders, and our faculty and staff and students are doing just great work to keep us moving forward and having great outcomes. But if I was to just summarize, there's so many wonderful things that came out from today, but we obviously operate at many scales. We're engaged with community, but you just can't be engaged. You have to think about history, culture, identity, as you refer to it as a cultural project in how we approach this, Sheila, in terms of your colleagues and your work. We've talked about collaboration. Gina, you've touched on many ways that we collaborate in the different venues in which we do that. Same with you, Brad, thinking about human and non-human interaction and relationships and how that's also collaborative. But there are many other levels of collaboration where we're talking about the private sector, government, community, and so forth. We can go on and on. The importance of citizen leaders I think that's incredibly important when you think about the University of Virginia. Obviously, its great long history, but that we want students to go out and actually be leaders and important citizens to maintain our democracy and keep challenging us as we go forward. And then we've also talked about innovation and the different ways that we think about innovation and redefining design and architecture education and practice and how incredibly important that is. And so that's just a snapshot. Hopefully we'll dive deeper over the next 2 days. But we just wanted to give you an overview of how we see things happening within the school, and certainly not operating in silos, which is why we're all here. And certainly if we had a group of all the people we collaborated across grounds, this whole stage would be filled because there's so many wonderful colleagues here. So with that said, I want to thank you all, Gina, Brad, Suzanne, Sheila. Look forward to having more conversation later today. Thank you very much.